Hello and welcome to Rajib Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Ferreira. Israeli Defense Minister earlier this week said that scientists at the country's main biological research institute have made a significant breakthrough in developing an antibody to the novel coronavirus as the researchers wrapped up the development phase and moved to patent and mass-produce the potential treatment. A statement said that the antibody's development had been completed and that the institute was in the process of patenting and to find the next stage as well. The researchers will approach international companies to produce the antibody on a commercial scale. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the antibody breakthrough against coronavirus and other treatments. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Malka, Ambassador of Israel in India, Sushmi, Assistant Editor, National Bureau, Times of India, and Rajib Dasgupta of JNU joins us on the program as well. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. All right, Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. Tell us more about the antibody breakthrough that the Israeli scientists have developed against coronavirus.
Well, actually, the Israeli researchers, our best Israeli researchers that are, I would say, professional and also creative, since this outbreak of the coronavirus, focused on finding solutions, medicine or a vaccine to this COVID-19 pandemic. The breakthrough is actually in finding a set of antibodies, 3 antibodies, that can neutralize the virus and block it from infecting the human cells. So this is an outbreak. These antibodies meet 3 important parameters. First, they are fully human monoclonal. They are meant to bind and to distinct parts of the coronavirus, and in that sense, block it and not enabling it to infect the human cell. And IIBR, our Institute of Biological Research, demonstrated the ability of those antibodies to neutralize the coronavirus. These 3 parameters together are a breakthrough, which will later enable us to achieve a full treatment in much less time than we needed before. This is the significant achievement that we have with this breakthrough. It shortens the time for full treatment dramatically.
Okay, all right. So, Professor, let me bring you to the picture now. How does the antibody treatment really work, and how is it different from a vaccine?
The antibody treatment, or to be more specific, the monoclonal antibody treatment or monoclonal antibody therapy, to be specific, has been under investigation as a potential therapeutic intervention, not just now, but with the other previous coronavirus infections, which is both SARS and MERS. What it essentially targets, as the ambassador was explaining, is to bind the receptor domains of the S protein as well as the other proteins. The advantage in this case of COVID-19, or to be specific for the causative agent, which is SARS-CoV-2, is the earlier experience with SARS-CoV, the SARS disease, the earlier SARS version, and the MERS-CoV, and because these receptors are identified. So essentially what these neutralizing monoclonal antibodies do is to prevent the virus from and therefore causing the disease. Now, what really the breakthrough is, and though some of these results will be shared by the Israeli Institute as it develops further, is that now cheaper mass-producing technologies are available, and that really can make this affordable, in contrast to vaccines, which will require greater development phase trials, and then, of course, making this available for the vulnerable population are ideal in entire population. The advantage here is that this will be therapeutic, and it will be therapeutic in a relatively early phase of the disease. So the patient will be both protected as well as rendered non-infectious. That's the theory at this point.
Okay, all right, Sushmi. So as far as this whole treatment or how the world is looking at COVID-19 and how to cure it is concerned, apart from Israel, what other research is taking place around the world to develop a vaccine or treatment?
So, Frank, there are countless studies and researches going around the world. This is a huge opportunity, and this is a huge health crisis, a pandemic which has grabbed the whole world. So, a lot of researchers around the world, starting from we all know about the WHO trials on remdesivir, which was earlier developed for Ebola. That is a major development, and recently US FDA, the strictest regulator, considered the strictest regulator in the world, has given emergency authorization for the use of the drug in US. Gilead has worked on it, has developed the drug, and WHO is doing a solidarity trial apart from what Gilead has done. Gilead had initially done trials in China around the drug, but had not found significant results. But in US trials, they have found results, and hence this approval comes through. Apart from that, there is now this Israel has announced this breakthrough. There is also Oxford University, Frank, which has very recently announced some development in vaccine, and that has shown a lot of promise, and they have entered trial. There are different estimates, but by some estimates, around 40 candidates of vaccine around the world being researched, including in India. So a lot of other trials, many repurposing of drugs, drugs which were earlier developed for other indications are now being tried, especially ones which have been used earlier for MERS and SARS are being looked at for coronavirus, for COVID-19 now. Hong Kong, UK are also, there are trials, significant developments in and around these countries.
All right, then, Ambassador, let me take the discussion forward with you. What I would like to know is, what led to the breakthrough really? Who is behind it or really responsible for it? And how long have scientists been working on this?
The family of the coronavirus is quite well known for a long time to humanity. The SARS, as the professor mentioned, and other viruses from this group, this family of viruses is known to humanity. And we've been doing this research for quite a while. But since this outbreak of the corona, the COVID-19, what we call and as its scientific name, emerged and came to us, our best researchers were asked to focus on finding a solution, either a vaccine or a medicine for this specific COVID-19 virus. So since I think maybe early January, they've been working just and focusing, concentrating on finding solution to this specific virus, which we call now the coronavirus, but it's very specific. So since then, all the best resources are used only for that. And we're talking about, as I said, best researchers, both professional and creative. And as I said, this breakthrough is really good news for us.
Absolutely, it is indeed good news for the entire world, really, as far as the breakthrough is concerned. But Professor, how long does it usually take for treatment like this to become commercially available? What are the various phases of testing and the various phases that treatment like this has to go through?
Actually, as Sushmi was explaining, all this, the regulatory processes are now being expedited all across the world by all regulatory agencies. The real breakthrough, and that's what probably the Israeli scientists are working on, is the new, more novel mass production technologies vis-a-vis these monoclonal antibodies or protein therapies. These would actually potentially require less time than approving or licensing a vaccine. This would entail, as we discussed earlier, actually working with a relatively smaller number of patients, and a lot of in vitro tests can actually happen, which means in the laboratory. And that probably is the promise that the Israeli Institute is working on. It is not that this is very new in the sense that, as we were discussing with the SARS and MERS infections, this has always been on the horizon as a potential therapy. As the world is racing to find multiple options, both repurposing, as Sushmi was explaining, plus the various initiatives and vaccines, this is another prong in this multi-pronged effort, so to say. And therefore, this is not one magic bullet in isolation, but it is really the battery of interventions that we would potentially be looking at in the horizon.
All right. So talking about, treatment, talking about what the world's doing, let's focus now on what India has been doing as well. Sushmi, what kind of treatment has India tried really, and what are we doing as far as research is concerned?
Okay, yeah, Frank. So, like I was saying, that the whole world is in a race to find a treatment, a therapy. Researchers and government agencies in India as well are also frantically looking at finding new ways, new solutions. And meanwhile, research is also going on. So in India, as ICMR has been saying, there are already studies, and ICMR has approved anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine for as a prophylactic for prophylactic use in risk groups as well as in healthcare workers. And there are simultaneously studies going around the world as well as in India for how this drug can be used, what is the safety and efficacy of the drug, even in prophylaxis and etc. India is also part of the WHO Solidarity Trial, and India has identified 4 hospitals as clinical trial sites, and others are in the process of being identified. They are also looking at enrolling subjects or patients into this trial, and though the trial has to start in phases, it has kick-started, but it'll sort of expand more going forward. So that's about remdesivir WHO trials. Apart from that, there are also India in a big way is looking at plasma therapy, convalescent plasma therapy, which is and ICMR has very recently initiated phase 2, which is an advanced phase of clinical trials. It has enrolled around 111 hospitals around the country, and more are in the process. Some 452 patients will be enrolled as part of this trial, and it's a randomized controlled trial. Randomized controlled trial is where you have 2 sets of patient groups, basically, one which receives the treatment, one which does not receive the treatment. So it establishes the whole thing in a much more strong way. So the findings are more authentic than small trials. So that's another. Then there are several vaccines and repurposing of drugs, research around those things going around. For instance, there are BCG vaccines being looked at, yellow fever vaccine being looked at. Then there is also some research around polio. Some 10 isolates, I believe, have been made in India, and there is research for vaccines, and for the research around them has been going around. In terms of drugs and therapies, there are several drugs again. Some of them, or rather most of them, being looked around in world, and some of them also being looked around in India. For instance, there.
Okay, we seem to have lost the audio.
There is apart from
go ahead. We can hear
Ebola,
you.
which was initially developed for Ebola. Can you hear me? Yeah. So
Go
there
ahead.
are also drugs for which are being used for which are being used for alcohol addiction, something like alcohol addiction, are also being looked at in India for coronavirus, for treatment of coronavirus. But currently, most of the things that are being looked at or are being used are actually supportive treatment. They're not treatment or not therapy. They are to support the treatment. There is also another important thing which India has recently done is ICMR has approved or given out guidelines for use of HIV combination drug, lopinavir and ritonavir combination, which is very important. And they have said that this can be used in moderately severe patients, and hospitals will have to monitor those patients very carefully and with the consent and they will have to also take a consent from ICMR. They'll have to take consent from patients. So, but it can be used. So these are very significant developments, especially in a situation where you have nothing at all. But these are all supportive treatments. These are not treatment per se. So and vaccines are going to be very, very important in this whole role, especially till the time we have a definitive treatment or a therapy coming up for to treat COVID patients.
Absolutely. Since we're talking about India, Ambassador, and since you're with us on the program, so I must take this opportunity to ask you a question about cooperation taking place between India and Israel as well. I can see both the flags placed behind you. So I must ask you this question. What kind of cooperation is taking place between great friends India and Israel in this field and in other fields as well?
Well, first I would start with that as you well mentioned, Israel and India are good friends, close friends. And this crisis even brought us closer. So, of course, there are many things that we do together. We support each other. There is a mutual trust and respect between our two countries. So, lots of support. Even now, ongoing Israeli experts for agriculture and water and crisis management of different organizations and processes are now cooperating with their counterparts here in India. And there is, as our two prime ministers decided, there have been two conversations between our two prime ministers since this outbreak of the coronavirus, and they decided to cooperate in science and technology. So we are doing this in different levels, on government-to-government level, on business-to-business level, and also between our scientists and research institutions between our two countries. We just proposed about 50 topics that are related to health issues that are related to the coronavirus that we decided and offered to cooperate and work together in research and development between our two countries. There are always new areas, new initiatives, not only to treat the coronavirus or create vaccine, but also to manage this special situation that we got into, this lockdown, best practices that we share about how we manage this lockdown, how we manage to flatten the infection curve. We got fully control of this infection curve, so we share all the best practices that we do, all the new developments, even technology developments like new respirators that can be massively produced in low cost, different fabrics that can kill this virus, and other measures and developments that can really prevent infection and help us a lot in these trying times. So, of course, we share all this. There was a great cooperation, very close cooperation between our two countries and nations. And maybe it's a good time also to thank the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Civil Aviation for supporting Israel in evacuation of thousands of Israelis that needed to go back to Israel, and also supporting us in drugs and I'd say all the materials that we need in this sense.
Absolutely. And let's hope and pray that this friendship, this great friendship, continues for several years and several decades to come as well. All right, so time to get closing comments from all the panelists now, starting first with you, Professor. As far as a treatment, vaccine, or whatever you can call it, how long till we see it? Because you yourself said that, the world seems to be moving expeditiously to try and get a treatment against this coronavirus. Best case scenario, what are we looking at? Professor, if you can hear me.
Yes, I do.
Yes, go ahead.
So different researcher groups, different countries and different industries have been making somewhat varied claims. That's something which only time will tell, I guess. But the other Israeli experience that the world is looking at is its mass scale population level antibody testing, which is what Israel is going to launch into, which is what Germany is also working on. That will give us an idea of the immunity at the population level and the nature of preparedness that the next wave will entail, particularly for countries such as Israel, which have reasonably well coped with the first wave. India, of course, is still somewhat in the middle of the first wave, I would guess. We are still in a very rapidly expanding phase. But the second wave is something which is of importance to all these countries which are going to encounter the flu season as we move into the winter, another 6 months hence roughly. And that's where the antibody testing experience of Israel, Germany, and other countries, and India would also need to get into that phase of knowledge generation and experimentation. And these really are the various facets.
All right. So, Sushmi, what's the best way forward?
Vaccines are, of course, going to be of paramount importance in terms of efficacy as well as cost effectiveness till the time there is a drug or a therapy which is discovered. But Frank, I also feel that the new normal and people have to adapt to this new normal, understand this new normal, and hygiene practices, wearing masks, social distancing or physical distancing is going to be very, very important. And for a long time, people will have to learn to live with it, because and they have to change the discipline, the lifestyle, and build immunity alongside. Elderlies will have to be taken care of. For them also, the lifestyle has to change. How organizations are operating, how institutions are operating, how schools, colleges are operating, all of this is going to see a major change. The whole economic scenario will also have to take a restructuring. So as alongside research, all this will have to evolve as we move forward. And as Rajib was pointing out, that there is India will have to increasingly invest on research and also look at, because this is going to come back. There is going to be a second wave of the virus. Indian companies are playing a very important role. Indian companies like Serum, Bharat Biotech, and Zydus have done quite well in terms of research in such vaccines. And a lot of countries and companies outside India are also collaborating with Indian companies in terms of research and taking this all forward. So I think there is hope, and humans have to have faith in science and advancement, and hope for the best.
All right, and Ambassador, close the show for us with your concluding remarks with the best way forward, and also by when can we hope to see some, the antibody development that the Israelis are presently doing at the moment? When can we see it commercially available?
I hope in the coming months. I'm not an expert for that. I'm not really know what the protocol says and what are the demands. I know that we put all our best resources. So there is not a budget limit or a resource limit for this. This is a top priority, and we are working on that. And hopefully we'll be able to complete it within the coming months. And as the professor said, to see that we can really massively produce it. And of course, to expand it and to spread it all to the world. And hopefully this good news will make us see in the coming few months a medicine and a treatment, full treatment for the coronavirus. And like every crisis, also this crisis brings big opportunities. We can also focus on that. As I said, India and Israel became even closer. Not only in the scientific and technological cooperation, but in other areas. And I think that if we conduct our deeds and cooperation in the right way, we will get even stronger after this. So with this optimistic view, let's continue.
Absolutely. Let's continue with that same optimism and let's work together and we shall prevail at the end is what the panelists are suggesting. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture and putting things into perspective for us. That's it for me. See you again next time.